So there's been a whole lot of debate and controversy surrounding Starfield recently, but a very common sentiment that I keep hearing over and over and over again is that Starfield is just great value No Man's Sky because they're actually remarkably similar, even though they technically aren't the same genre. For a little bit of clarity, Starfield is a space RPG, whereas No Man's Sky is sort of a space sim. And considering that I've put 40 hours into Starfield so far and over 130 hours into No Man's Sky across PC and PS4, I figured I would give a little comparison of the two. To start things off, I'm gonna just keep it real right off the bat and say that after playing Starfield, I would vastly prefer it over No Man's Sky if I had to choose one or the other. Now look, do not get me wrong, okay? I freaking love No Man's Sky, and it's by far my favorite space game compared to Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous. But just like Starfield, it has plenty of its own issues, with the main one being that the game is simply far too expansive for its own good. At the end of the day though, you have to form your own opinion, believe it or not, with the information I'm going to present, because although they do share similarities, they play like two completely different games. And honestly, I'm more biased towards Starfield simply because I prefer the RPG elements over No Man's Sky's more open-ended sandbox style of gameplay. So first, let's talk about exploration, because this is, of course, the biggest selling point of both games. Starfield advertises roughly 1,000 planets to explore, whereas No Man's Sky boasts 18 quintillion planets, and I'm not joking by the way, feel free to look that up. And if that sounds way too good to be true, that's because ding ding ding. It really fucking is. But at the very least, No Man's Sky allows you to travel seamlessly between worlds and go literally wherever you want, because planets actually exist as a physical object in the game, whereas Starfield is just made up of a bunch of different cells to give the illusion of a seamless world. Now, both games suffer from a very similar issue in the form of procedural generation. I will give No Man's Sky the edge in terms of planetary variety, because you can find all sorts of weird and unique flora, fauna, trees, and different colored grasses across hundreds of planets. Whereas in Starfield, every coniferous forest, deciduous forest, swamp, hill, or mountain biome looks relatively similar no matter what planet you're on. No Man's Sky simply does a far better job in inspiring a sense of awe and wonder on every planet you land on, like you're actually exploring an uncharted alien landscape. Where both games fail, however, is in structure generation, but Starfield definitely has the edge over No Man's Sky. My biggest problem with Starfield is that structures are just too far and few between. In my personal experience, whenever you land on a planet, there tends to be on average 1 to 6 structures within 300 to 1400 meters away from your spawn point. Considering there's no vehicles in this game and sprinting obviously uses a form of stamina, it becomes really annoying running back and forth between structures. The only saving grace is that, like in other Bethesda titles, you can travel between structures once you discover them. Overall, the structures found in Starfield are all super high quality and are really varied. In terms of just outposts that spawn enemies and loot, I can't remember an exact number of unique structures I've come across, but it's somewhere around 10. Some of these outposts are like full-on dungeons, taking upwards of 20 minutes to fully clear and loot. The biggest issue, like I said earlier, is really just a lack of spawns. I would simply like to see more structures spawning. Now as for No Man's Sky, the structures are really terrible. Honestly, they're just never enjoyable or rewarding to explore. It's the same dozen or so outposts with nothing but a handful of materials, maybe a save point, and 10% of the time a couple enemies to kill. There's also trading posts and space stations, but it's the same exact story. There's simply just nothing to do outside of trading, and even if you explore a derelict freighter, there's nothing unique to find besides some treasure that might net you a few 100,000 credits. On top of this, structures in No Man's Sky spawn even less frequently than Starfield and are much harder to find. I will give credit to the mining and outpost building aspect of the game, however. Outpost building is much more robust in No Man's Sky, with far more structures available for you to utilize in your bases. Starfield feels incredibly bland in comparison, mainly consisting of prefabricated structures which really limit creative freedom. Also, the material collection system in No Man's Sky is just a lot more enjoyable because you're able to destroy almost every single rock, plant, and tree you can see. Whereas in Starfield, you're relegated to a few ore veins scattered across the world. Also, No Man's Sky has the benefit of land vehicles and atmospheric flight, as well as a really great and in-depth jetpack customization system, making travel across planets much more bearable. Basically, how jetpacks work in this game is first you obtain and slot an upgrade module with random stats, and these can boost jetpack height, overall fuel consumption, and a few more stats. It's actually a very great system that allows you to customize exactly how you want your jetpack to work, and it's far better than in Starfield, where they make you choose between balance, skip, and power packs without any real customization aside from perk bonuses. Next, we're going to talk about ships, and this is a pretty mixed bag, I won't lie. It really comes down to customization versus functionality. In Starfield, you can customize every single aspect of your ship. This includes the landing gear, cockpit, cargo holds, engines, etc. In No Man's Sky, you're completely at the mercy of RNG, with randomly generated stats, storage, ship class, and even aesthetics. Also, they don't have walkable interiors like in Starfield. Honestly though, it's not the worst thing in the world, and a lot of the randomly generated ships actually look really cool. Simply put, if you want a more customizable experience, then Starfield easily wins. On the flip side, however, No Man's Sky does have freighters, which are just ginormous megaships that can act as storage for your smaller ships. But once again, these are entirely randomly generated. All that being said, I still feel like No Man's Sky has far more enjoyable ships when it comes to piloting. Space battles feel much better, especially thanks to the latest update, and flying overall just feels a lot more intuitive and responsive. Moving on from ships, there is in fact a story in No Man's Sky, believe it or not, but to be totally honest, I never ended up beating it because it's just really boring and it mainly serves as a glorified tutorial. Now, Starfield's story certainly isn't anything groundbreaking, but after a couple hours, things really start to ramp up, and what begins as an artifact fetch quest quickly turns into a really engaging story filled with lots of choices and an amazing cast of characters. Not to mention, in typical Bethesda fashion, there's also dozens of hours of side quests, so there's really no debate to be had here. And that right there just about sums up the No Man's Sky versus Starfield debate. Overall, these are two games that may share a lot in common with each other, but they're going to give you two drastically different gameplay experiences. Simply put, if you want space Minecraft, then go ahead and play No Man's Sky. If you want a deep RPG with a focus on storytelling and world building, then play Starfield. Neither one is objectively better than the other, and it really comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.